Welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk to everyday people about faith and work. My name is Micah. I'm joined tonight by my co-host, John. And this is an episode of fan-friendly feedback, which means we got comments, and we're responding to some comments.
Why are Lutherans and Reformed so boring?
I'm going to need to know who asked this.
I don't know who asked this, dude. I don't have it. It's on my notes.
I think Lutherans and Reformed so boring.
I think I know where that question comes from.
Yeah.
I think I know where the question comes from, but I still think you're wrong. My assumption is this question comes from like Twitter wars. Maybe my assumption comes from like there being tweets that are so weird. Like, how should community be served? On the tongue or by hand or whatever the hell it is that was said on Twitter. Like, why are you singing hymns when you can sing the Psalms? It was just good enough. Like, some of like the most driest and boring and sometimes stupidest of like hyper debates, man. Women should be wearing head coverings on Sunday, and if you're not, you need to repent. Like, none of that stuff is interesting, man.
This is some people.
It's that's
clearly.
Do you want to spend the weekend with that person?
No. Not particularly.
Or you want to hang out with people who drink bourbon and smoke cigars and talk theology?
See, I think the people that I know who have talked about that sort of thing, like some of those topics, they do that as well, right?
Yeah, but they ruin the drink and the cigar when they do
it. Are you sure it's
that's
not
a
just
freaking abomination, man?
Are you sure it's just not you're just not convicted about your wife not having a head covering?
No, I'm not convicted about her cutting her hair either.
She cuts her hair? Don't you know that's her covering as well, but not her covering enough of a covering?
She sometimes wears yoga pants too.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to leave.
What?
It's like that whole modesty thing. It's like, oh, you shouldn't go to co-ed pools or co-ed beaches. It's like, well, I guess I can't swim with my family anymore.
I know, right? See, y'all are pagan, dude.
I know, dude. We're so pagan. My wife works outside the house. We do. My wife also swimming.
My wife also smokes cigars and drinks bourbon with me. Does that make her not a lady?
No,
not even on the right question, man.
We're off the rails. I don't get the question though. Why are Lutherans and Reformed boring? Like, I don't think we are, man.
In all seriousness, man, I think it's because of like us hating on like a lot of times Reformed people tend to hate on like contemporary worship services. Like the fog machines and like, we're not going to sing Bethel. We're not going to sing Jesus Culture. Okay. We're not going to do that. Sermons tend to be more so about teaching than hyping up or being pep talks and that kind of thing. Like, we're going to teach the scriptures and more so give you like 5 principles to live by that will transform your life. Like, and that kind of stuff.
And here's
that's kind of what I think it's about. Yeah, right.
Okay.
So I think it's more so like hating against the attractional method of ministry and that kind of thing. Go ahead.
Oh. That's just dumb. Like, this is one of the issues that I've had with kind of the Bethel charismatic movement is they'll talk about stuff like they'll give lip service to like spiritual disciplines and like going to church and all that sort of thing. But then they'll talk about like, oh, there's got to be like this theology of breakthrough. And you've got to like work this stuff up and pray for it, and every once in a while God does something miraculous. It's like, okay, great. Like we don't. I don't think anyone who's a genuine Christian who's not like a real weirdo, because I've seen a couple real weirdos. No one denies that God does the miraculous and can do the miraculous.
But, yeah, dude. Our salvation is miraculous.
Yes. Yeah. But
your sanctification is miraculous.
So if we, because I know your church does contemporary music, right? but it's like hymns.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
you're doing hymns. You're doing like Getty music. You're doing theologically sound music, right?
Yeah, there's that stuff, and there's some things that like might be considered like CCM top 40, but it's very selective in what
right. So you guys, your elders, pastors, whoever's running the music, are evaluating the songs theologically.
Yeah.
And you're not doing a big, smoke machines and spotlights and stuff.
Nah, it's on the budget, man.
Yeah. And even if it was, I doubt you would. Right?
Probably not.
Your church would.
No.
So if that's boring, if like songs and like, okay, so my church, we have a traditional service and we have a blended service. The blended service has like half hymns and half contemporary songs. The contemporary songs are vetted and they are solid songs. They're theologically good songs. We're not singing like the top 40 necessarily, right? Just as a general rule.
So kind of the same thing probably as what we're doing.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's similar. Like you guys are Reformed and liturgical and non-denom. I'm LCMS and liturgical. If that is boring, like those and what those songs are doing are disciple, like they are a sermon that you remember. That's what a song is, right? A Christian song, a hymn, whatever you're actually singing. So you are being discipled by saying the creed every week. You're being discipled by singing those songs every week and reading scripture together every week. You're being discipled and formed by that. The people who are going to like Saddleback or Fellowship Church, kind of, just the generic elevation, whatever, they're being formed by that too. Right? The question is, what are you being formed into? Are you being formed into faithfulness and truth? Or are you being formed into like dopamine and, like dopamine hits and theologically nebulous songs? Like Reckless Love or whatever it is. Like the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Like that's not how the Bible describes God at all. So why would we disciple ourselves in a way that the Bible doesn't refer to God? Right? You following me?
No, yeah, I'm following you.
Agree? Disagree?
I agree, man. I agree. I thought you were going to say something else that I thought I was going to push back on, but I agree with you. We're on the same page. I thought you were going to like push up because what I thought you were going to say, which might still warrant some kind of a response, was that if you find church boring, then like something to the equivalent of like probably like you're not really like in the flock type kind of thing. And I would, yeah. And it's like I don't think so. I think everybody wrestles with different things for different reasons. And so that's kind of where I was going to go.
Yeah, this is dependent on the definition of boring being more traditional, theologically rooted church.
Right.
Versus the show, the production. Like if you listen to Johnny Simmons' most recent episode with us, it's showbiz. That is arguably more entertaining and maybe interesting if you wanted to use that word. That type of thing, that type of big box office, big production concert, that's probably more fun than singing a hymn along with an organ. Just from a, secular standpoint.
We should like do an in-person event with Johnny sometime, man. I think that'd be fun.
Dude, yeah. Yeah, he's awesome.
But like the key word I think you said like earlier is discipleship, right?
Yeah.
And so like when I was, because I think I'm old enough now that I've been like in the faith for half my life.
Yeah.
And so like the first 5-7 years or so, like of my life, I would probably have put a really heavier, the first 5 to 7 years of being in the faith in my life, I would have probably put a heavier emphasis on like modern CCM music, like the instruments are drastically important. And like all these things that we now, you and I call showbiz today, I would have said are really important. And I don't think all of the reasons I would give probably are inherently wrong. Some of them were inherently wrong. Because like I still to this day will say just because something is modern doesn't make it inherently wrong. Like I will probably never stop saying that. Just because something is old doesn't make it inherently bad. Everything should be examined, and you should make a decision based off of examining it. But like I value the creeds, and I'm valuing more liturgy than I would have then.
Yeah.
And I value hymns now and old songs now more than I did then. Some of them still suck, but some of them were really freaking awesome. But a lot of that was because I had not been, discipled in certain areas, right? I was still young in the faith, and I hadn't been learned or taught any of the values of these things.
Yeah.
And so somebody can find those things boring, partially because they haven't been taught the value of those things, right? A lot of people are told they're good because they're old, and what's young, what you like is young, and your generation is just evil and wicked, and you're beyond salvation. Like those things get said, and so like when you're young and you hear like things are bad because they're young, you tend to like develop a bitterness towards something old being good just because it's old. Yeah. And so like the discipleship aspect of this is key. Is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Is the discipleship aspect of this is key. Go ahead.
I think that's true. And I think like if you look at kind of the two main different models you see in America, U.S. Of church, you have attractional and you have the traditional. Let's say, those really do show a different focus on what they believe the church is and should be doing. So if the church is your front door to Christianity, right, you're trying to make it attractive to people, you're trying to market to them to some degree to get them to come check your church out, right? And then that kind of pragmatism and like business marketing strategies change or work their way out of what church is. So is church the on-ramp to the Christian life, right? How you're introduced to it? Well, for part of our history, maybe. But I think, if we zoom back out and say, okay, what is church for? Well, in like my denomination, can't speak for everyone, but in my denomination, it's the church is there to disciple the believer and to forgive sins, like to broadcast Christ's forgiveness to people. So that's the focus that we have. And really that plays out in, okay, why are we saying the creed? Well, we're confessing our faith. We're saying back to God, we're, what he has said to us. We are being formed by that. We're being discipled by that. We're being brought deeper and deeper, that sort of thing. So in that instance, church service is for the church, for the believers, not for the unbelievers. Not to exclude them, but
it
that's
probably
the
should.
Focus.
Yeah. So like so I would argue that the church probably should not be the front door, like to your faith. I'd probably argue that probably is not. It probably should not be. I've had this. It's interesting that we're talking about this because I remember having this debate with a guy, recently, not recently, like 3 years ago, But like, I don't think that if you're doing like your Sunday thing, your Sunday service correctly, it should be boring. It should inherently automatically be boring to non-believers. I do think that there's aspects of it that probably should feel foreign to them because it's not something that person is a part of yet. So in that aspect of it, it's probably best for your worship service to not be attractional. What probably should be attractional about your Sunday gathering should be the character and heart of the people that you're seeing. That should be attractional, without question. Like there should be something so different about the gathering of those people, their character, their attitude, who's there, that should be attractional to the person who is outside the faith that for whatever reason is there that day. And so like, I don't think demonizing the word attractional is probably the best thing. Because I think there's ways that
I'm going to do it.
Well, there's ways that can be bad.
By all means, invite people to church. Bring them to your church. They will, but we shouldn't be dumbing down what we do at church to avoid weirding out a non-believer, right?
Like there should be a lot of there should be a lot of questions that person has that you better be excited to answer as y'all hopefully go out to dinner afterwards, go back to the house, or have a cigar, whatever it is. They better have they should have a whole lot of questions, and you should be really excited to answer them. No, your yes, I'm like a no.
Well, I was thinking about something. I lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to add, but no, probably not important.
Yeah, probably not.
Shut up.
But yeah, I think that's kind of what they were asking about. Like, why is it so?
Okay.
Because if you're not used to it, man, this stuff is weird. Even if you're a Christian, man, like I know we're focusing on like Christian versus like non-Christian.
Yeah.
But like, man, like if you grew up in a charismatic church, that's where like just where you went, and like that's what you think the faith is supposed to look like. And I do think some of those people have like there's some good intentions like with what they're trying to do. They just miss the mark. But like if that's what you're used to, man, and you walk into like a liturgical service, like that's gonna like really throw you off guard.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like it should, man, because like both these people claim to be a part of the family, and they both look drastically different. And that's kind of confusing.
I grew up in a very traditional Baptist environment, and we had basically like only a piano. That was like, it was just piano accompaniment for the songs. It was old school like Methodist and Baptist hymns, right? But basically from modern from American history for the most part, maybe some English as well. And then I went from there and to me that got boring, right? From there, I've been in a big box kind of contemporary. They had a really good band, really great production. They weren't crazy over the top with it like some places are, but it was stereotypical attractional contemporary worship for the most part. Obviously, there's still Christian songs for the but that was a different environment, and that was more interesting to me. For sure. And then as I started becoming convictionally Lutheran, then my taste started changing, right? Like I don't listen to organ music, 24/7, but I see the value in like the hymns and songs that are far, far older than when I grew up singing. And I see value in modern songs that are theologically rich and accurate and correct. I'm not discriminating based on age of song, But I've been through like 3 very different church experiences, and I think that gearing our churches, if we're thinking about how do we make unbelievers comfortable, that's the wrong way to go about it. We shouldn't be trying to make them uncomfortable, but
Right.
the church service is not ultimately for them. Like, oh, this is what I just wanted to add earlier. Like when it comes to like inviting your friends, inviting people to church. I mean, the reason we invite them is so they'll hear the word. Because God's word is the active force in conversion. So we want them to be, if they are not a believer, we want them to become a believer. Well, how do they become a believer? By hearing and believing the word. So they need to hear the word. So yeah, by all means, invite them to church. Bring them to church with you.
Beautiful.
So yeah, are we boring? Oh, maybe in the best way.
Oh man, I think that, man, dude, because I actually think, even though like it sounds like a silly or dumb question, I think there's actually a lot of layers to it that you can actually unpack. It's because to some extent you have to like, who's asking the question, because that matters.
Yeah.
Who's asking the question? Why do they think it's boring? What's their background? What do they wrestle with? What do they not wrestle with? What's their personality like? I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, because like I know when I was younger, if I looked at like a really like conservative Baptist worship service, and like there's just a little lady like on a piano and organ with a hymn book open, like I would look at that as somebody. I would look at that as somebody who didn't somebody or a church that didn't care enough about worship to actually make an effort, because I saw it as kind of lazy. But when I saw like maybe like a bigger church that had like a band, like a guitar, drums, piano, 2 or 3 people on like singing, I saw that as something that people like crafted and put together and practiced and made an effort in and that kind of thing. And so like I saw that as something that was probably more honoring, because to me that looked like it took effort, whereas the other one was like, I was gonna do it with all his because it's easy. And so there's a lot of layers to this stuff, man, and like a lot of it depends on people's background and that kind of thing.
Because like looking back, you wouldn't hold with the exact same view. You wouldn't be poo-pooing necessarily the piano and the old lady, you know.
Not like inherently, no. Not like
I would hope not.
Not automatically. Not automatically.
She's put more work into that piano than any of those twinks and jeans did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, no, like I wouldn't like automatically assume that. No.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things we should aim for in our church services is transcendence, because it is spiritual, it is supernatural. God is coming to us in His Word and sacrament. So I think Johnny Simmons, he, in a recent episode, he talked about reverence being part of that, as part of the biblical kind of instruction on worship. So I think a lot of people are kind of searching for transcendence to some degree and looking for more. So like we don't have to fake that as part of the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And you don't get transcendence in the same sense from a modern band. Like you might get them in varying degrees, but like a little old lady plinking on a piano, not super transcendent, right? I don't know.
My stance, man, is like there's nothing wrong with either one, and that's kind of like where I'm good with being. I'm not good with like elevating one above, like one hair like above the other.
Well, you know that at Jesus' church service, he had an organ, right?
I'm sure he did, man. And they passed around the Welch's grape juice too, right?
Yeah, Welch's, totally. Oh, dude, I saw a tweet the other day from some. You probably saw it too. And he said, "Alcohol." Some guy saying alcohol doesn't occur in nature anywhere, and Jesus didn't make alcohol or something like that. and there was a community note that got slapped on it that said Jesus literally made wine. Source the Bible.
How did you not have
fantastic?
How did you not send that to me?
If I see it again, I will. But yeah, it's
all right,
fantastic.
We got one more question, and this one's basically for you, dude, because like my experience here is like non-existent. I think I've been to this place once, and that's not really enough. What is high church? I think I've been to a high church worship service like once, man. So
really?
Like, it probably was low high too.
We do talk a little bit about this. We don't get into the weeds too much, but we did talk a little bit about this with Johnny Simmons, who's a music director at a high church, relatively high church, Anglican church or Anglican parish in Houston. And so we talk a little bit about the contrast there between high and low church, mainly kind of in the Anglican tradition. And that's where the terms come from. As far as I know, they're not really part of the conversation in like Roman Catholic or Orthodox or, or Lutheran. I don't think they're having the same discussions, right?
That's good.
Is it? I don't know. So, okay, just to contrast. So high church is really, it's going to be if a church is a high church, number one, they're going to be sacramental. So there's going to be a focus on the sacraments, different from probably modern American evangelicalism, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be strictly American. Johnny and I talked about some of the churches in Australia and England, that there are churches that are they have very traditional liturgy. They are sacramental, but they are mainline liberal at this point. So a lot of their theology would be progressive or liberal. And so the low church ones are the ones who have, those particular instances, have faithful theology, and their expression of church, how they do their church worship service, would be more what we call low church. So sacramental, liturgical, there's going to be an emphasis probably on ordination or the priesthood or the pastoral role, more so than in other low church denominations. In like the Baptist church, there's a focus on the priesthood of the believers, and there is no hierarchical or ritual priesthood of any sort. Whereas in Anglican, Lutheranism, Catholicism, others, there's more of a focus on the role and the office of the pastor or the priest. So that's another one. Then some traditions are Episcopal in their structure. So meaning they would have pastors or priests or, whatever the title they're giving their ministers. And then they're going to have a structure of accountability that goes up to like bishops, right? In the Catholic Church, it's very, very formalized. There's the Pope, and then there's cardinals, and there's archbishops and bishops, and priests, and there are other roles as well. Whereas you don't have that structure in a Baptist denomination. So that's kind of another mark of what you might consider high church. So yeah, it's really beliefs and practices of how people do church. And that's sacramental, liturgical, and then emphasis on priesthood and sacraments and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that covers it all or if that helps. But if you think about a service where there are... Okay, so think about the structure of a service. You enter the building, find your seat. The band comes out, warms up. Maybe there's some announcements. You sing a few songs. You sit down. You listen to the sermon. You sing another song. And maybe there's some announcements. Maybe there's baptism. Maybe there's communion. It's pretty quick, and they pass things out on on your rows. You're probably sitting in chairs. There might not be an actual pulpit up front, but maybe it's a music stand or some sort of smaller pulpit, or maybe the pastor's sitting down. That's low church. That's one expression of low church. Another way to look at this, you enter the building, find your seat. A little lady comes out and plunks on a piano. A music director or a deacon or somebody gets up and leads the singing and waves his arm, and you guys sing out of hymn books. Pastor gets up. He's in a 3-piece suit or a 2-piece suit or whatever. Preaches a sermon. You sing some more songs. You go home. That's another expression of low church. Two very different expressions of it, but that's still low church. High church. You walk in the building. You get your hymnal out, or maybe they have the order of service printed on a bulletin, a large bulletin. Let me walk you through a bit of a liturgy there. How a high church might look. So you take your seat, right? You walk in, you take your seat, and then one of the pastors walks forward to the front of the congregation. He's wearing some form of vestments, so maybe it's an alb, which is like a long white robe, and a stole or chasuble, which is decorative cloth over the shoulders. He greets you. And then you turn and face the lobby, or the narthex, as some people call it. And there is another pastor and maybe an acolyte, or a boy, or another elder or something like that, holding a cross. And you stand, look at there. You may read a psalm responsively. So you would read one line, the congregation reads a line, the pastor reads a line, it's a responsive song. Then you sing a hymn as they carry the cross and proceeds down the aisle. Call that the processional. And then the pastor comes up after the processional and the song finishes, the pastor comes up and performs the absolution. We could get into all of these, but I figure for the sake of time, we'll just go through it. And it's a public confession of sin, and in the Reformed tradition, it would be assurance of pardon. In other traditions, it would be absolution. So the pastor, in the stead and for the sake of Christ, forgives you your sin, exercising the office of the keys, or as they believe. A corporate prayer. There would be another song, and then there'd be a prayer of the day, or collect, which the pastor would come and pray up front. Then there would be, I think, about 3 different scripture readings, right? So there'd be an Old Testament, a New Testament, and then a gospel reading. So usually there's an Old Testament reading, an epistle reading, and then a gospel reading. And then you might sing an Alleluia in there. You might sing another traditional song that's very short, another hymn. Then there's a sermon. The sermon is 15 to 20 minutes, roughly. There's some places that go longer. Then you recite the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, depending on the Sunday. Then you take the offering up. And there's singing in there, and then there's the prayers of the church, right? You go from the offering to, and you're sitting and standing in the middle of all this, right? So the prayers of the church are the collects where the pastor comes and prays for specific needs. Like in my church, we pray for the leadership of the country every single Sunday, no matter who it is. Right? Could be Biden, could be Trump. We're praying for them. Then there's about a 20 minute section that is just reserved for the Lord's Supper. So, and then there's a whole liturgy as we walk through that. And there's songs interspersed. So it's very, for someone who's not familiar with it, it seems very ritualistic. It is very traditional. But if you're not used to it, it's quite different and quite jarring. The instruments that are used for all of this, these are almost all hymns, no contemporary songs. The instruments are going to be organ, piano, maybe some orchestral instruments, not a band, right? Everything is done calmly and reverently. There's no pastor running out, hey, cracking a joke, hey guys, come on in, sit down, grab your coffee at the coffee shop outdoor, It's quite a different mindset. And it's very almost methodical in a lot of ways. So after communion, you sing a few songs. The pastor, the pastor prays or the congregation prays a written prayer together. The pastor then gives a benediction and dismisses, and then you sing another song and you're dismissed. So that's an example of like my church's liturgy, which would be a fairly high church. There's a lot more moving pieces, a lot more separate elements to the service for sure. Whereas a low church, there's not as many elements. There's still a lot of stuff going on, but not quite as many different elements of things. So it's more singing, announcements, singing, preaching, offering, communion done, right? And I know, John, you're not necessarily high church, but you do have a liturgy that would probably be you're medium rare. I know that you're not high church, but you are very liturgical in your service structure, right? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what you said was kind of familiar.
Yeah.
The biggest difference would probably be, I guess, more so the atmosphere. And the sermon is usually like an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's like you mentioned the I'm trying to pull it up actually. Let me see, because I don't want to leave anything out. Hey, do y'all do the smoke?
Nope. I wish we did, but no, we don't.
And so, we're, I guess, liturgical, but it wouldn't be considered high church. Atmosphere is different than what you're talking about. Sometimes, depending on who's available, we do have, guitar, piano, drums, and that kind of thing. It just depends on who's available. Jeans are very, very common, especially on stage, that kind of thing. But, there's a collect. Right now we're reading from Acts instead of the Old Testament. Confession of sin, prayer of absolution, congregational reading together from the Psalms. Then we go into there's 2 songs, the sermon, and the passage for the sermon is read together as a congregation, followed by a confession of faith, usually the Apostles' Creed. Once a month it's the Nicene. Then we do communion, which takes about with y'all 15, 20 minutes. There's scripture from that. Then there's 1, maybe 2 songs. After that there's 1, maybe 2 songs. Prayer for the church, gospel reading, and Actually, my bad. The 2 songs come after the gospel reading.
Yeah.
Then there's the reading from the epistles, and then a benediction, and then I know it kind of flew through that, but like I said, a lot of it's kind of similar to what you'd said.
Yeah. There's a lot of like separate elements. It's like you're standing to sing, you're sitting, you're standing to read the gospel, you're sitting.
Yeah.
You know,
we're standing for everything except for the sermon.
Yeah, so I think we stand for most things, honestly. But we'll sit for the Old Testament reading, and because we've been standing, then we'll sit down and then they read the Old Testament and then the epistle, but we stand for the gospel. So, words of Jesus, extra important. But yeah, so it definitely is like there are churches that are like kind of probably in the middle, right? As yours is. You've got a very liturgical service with more low church elements to it in some ways. But so I don't know if that actually made things clear or not for the person who was asking what high church versus low church was, but
probably both. Oh, so in y'all's service, is everything the pastor leading it?
Yes.
Okay. So that's interesting because for us, the scripture readings is usually somebody. It might be it might be one of the elders. It might be one of the men from the congregation.
So that probably goes back to how the different traditions view the office of ministry. Yeah. I know there are some Lutheran churches that have lay readers, and I'm sure there are some Anglican churches and stuff. Because there is, in my Lutheran LCMS denomination, it is congregational to an extent. It's not an Episcopal structure. Yeah. We do have what they call presidents and a president and a district president, which would kind of function like bishops in an Episcopal sense, but it's not. But we do have an element of congregationalism. So we don't have someone saying you must do things this way. So in some places there might be lay readers, but for the most part, I think in the conservative churches, the word and sacrament are going to be handled almost exclusively by the ordained ministers.
Cool.
So, yeah. But I know that there are some places that have lay readers and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and like if there's like, because at my church we have a senior pastor, an associate pastor, a pastor emeritus who's retired but still ministers on occasion. If more than a few of them are out of town, like if 2 of them are out of town and there's one there is, I think, one of the elders who has been who will step in and assist the pastor in some of the readings and things like that. So I know that's not done. That's not how it's done in every spot, but that's how I've seen it very occasionally if there's no one else. And I've got some friends who their church doesn't have a pastor. And so they don't consecrate the elements and serve the sacrament, but the elders will. One of the elders of the church, which is a little different than Reformed elders, they will do matins or basically like a prayer service. So it would be a similar liturgical service, but minus the sacrament. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. So, depending on context and conviction of the person involved.
I'm still trying to understand the Anglicans' understanding of deacons, man, because that kind of threw me off.
Yeah, so in simple terms, as far as I know, it's basically like a stepping stone to pastor. So if you become ordained to the diaconate, and it is a pastoral type role, but not fully a pastor. I don't know a whole lot about it other than that, but it is It's like basically if you become a deacon, you're probably on your way to becoming a pastor. It's like, so there are, because I think they take it from.
Wait a second. Hold on. So women pastors in the Anglican Church?
Well, if we're talking ACNA, then there are they have different options available. So only men can be bishops.
Yeah.
In their structure. In some, and the ACNA is divided up into different dioceses. I don't know if that's how you exactly pronounce it, but basically different sections of the country, or fall under different bishops, and those they have the freedom to operate within certain parameters. So some of them say you can only ordain women to become deacons and not pastors or priests.
Right.
Others say women can be priests but not bishops. And then others say like they could be deacons, priests, but not a bishop, right? That's universal for the ACNA. And then another few would say, well, women cannot be ordained at all. So they wouldn't be deacons or but it's a different, it's more, so if you think about the book of Acts, you've got Stephen, who is a deacon.
Yeah.
And he was preaching the word.
Yeah.
Because we kind of think of deacons as only people doing stuff around the church, right? Because that's kind of the modern focus on the deacon. But the Anglican view of deacon is more word focused. They would not necessarily consecrate the sacrament, though. In most places they probably wouldn't. So it's like there's levels of clergy, to break it down in a maybe unhelpful way. And as you go up, your responsibilities and privileges increase.
Because I was looking at a Anglican church website the other day. I think I messaged you, and like they had a female deacon, which as of right now, like from a Baptist Reformed perspective, like I'm fine with that. But like their understanding of deacon was clearly different than how I've always understood it.
Yeah.
And a part of her job was to provide pastoral care to the pastors or elders in the church. And I thought that was like the most bizarre thing. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
It's a different view of the word and role of deacon, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why like things are not necessarily interchangeable from denomination to denomination, because oftentimes there's a different, so when I was used to kind of the Baptist or Reformed version of elders. So elders are in it, but in the LCMS, elders actually function more like I think deacons would from my background. Whereas in the Reformed Church, for the most part, an elder is either a teaching elder or a ruling elder, right? They're either a pastor or whose focus is teaching, or a pastor whose focus is, administration or something like that. But they use elder and pastor interchangeably. So every denomination kind of changes stuff up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You got anything else on high church, man?
I don't think so.
Awesome. If anybody has any fantastic questions, comments, or slander for us based on anything we've talked about today, do not hesitate to drop it in the comments. But I don't think you've said so yet. If you actually made it this far, which you probably have because it's going to be broken into at least 3 parts, I hate myself. As always, like, comment, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the things you're supposed to when you watch this stuff on YouTube. We're going to close it up.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. We'll see you later.